In a previous video, I had the chance to rank all of the current football boots on the market, so I figured now would be a great time to go back and rank all of the best iconic football boots of all time. So I've gone ahead and collected 16 of the most memorable boots of the last century that we're gonna go over in this list. And to give you a heads up, I'm gonna be ranking these based off of personal preference, aesthetic, and my personal experience with the boot if I've gotten the chance to use it. I'm also gonna be comparing these boots against their modern present day version just to see how they stack up as well. Now without further ado, let's get into the tier list. Alright, so starting off our list, we have one of my personal favorite football boots, and that's the Nike CTR 360 Maestri 3. And this boot, not much more can be said about it as far as the impact it left on the market. It was one of the first control boots that's ever been released. Nike was hugely successful with it, and this boot, I think it influenced not just its own model line, but I think it had influences on the Tiempo, the Magista that came after it, as well as control boots from other brands like Adidas as well. It was an extremely comfortable football boot to wear. I wore this probably about 10 years ago. It was a crimson orange colorway, similar shade to this yellow here. But it's an amazing football boot. It wasn't leather, but it had that comfortable leather fitting sensation. Overall, I think this boot has to be S tier. There's a reason why Nike has just remade the model. It's sold out almost instantly. I personally hope that they bring it back for a longer period of time just because it's such a fan favorite. It's such a great football boot. Then next up, we have another fan favorite and another amazing boot, and that would be the Adidas F50 Adizero. Now this boot, similar to the impact we talked about with the CTR 360, this boot had such a huge impact on the speed boot world. When this boot was first released, it was the lightest football boot of all time. Adidas was really making a statement, and it had a lot of impacts on the Mercurial line from Nike that came later. You could say that the F50 was a big influence on that. And I also love this colorway here, this kind of purple chameleon style. I still remember when Messi first wore it. And in my opinion, this has to be another S tier. It's just such a great football boot. I still think it stands toe-to-toe with the Adidas X line that's been running for the past few years. I also, in addition to the CTR, I wish that Adidas would bring back the F50. I think, that's gonna be a common theme looking at some of these older models. I think Adidas and Nike, they had a lot of good ideas, in the past 20 years, especially in the early 2000s. And this was such a great design, such an iconic football boot. I would just love to see it back again. And now we're getting to our next boot. This is another one from Nike, and this is the Nike Total 90 Laser, the original variation, in this nice gold colorway. So this might be one of the most unique football boots on this list. It has a literal bullseye, running throughout the midfoot. It has these really bold and strong plastic elements that you don't see on really any other traditional style of football boot. This would be what you would classify today as something called a power boot. So it's kind of specifically intended for striking the ball hard, strong. Boots like the Total 90 Laser, they're not really focused on being light like maybe an F50 or a Mercurial Vapor. They're more focused on just being really, really solid and giving you a lot of traction on the ball. And from a design standpoint, I think that the Total 90 Laser, most people either love or hated this design. Some people thought it was a little bit tacky with that bullseye, but in my opinion, I think it worked really well. I think that the way Nike incorporated the target looks great. In this gold colorway, I think it shines in particular. I would say this is an A tier football boot, and I think it's also the best Total 90 variation that Nike's ever made as well. I think the first time they did it the best. And that kind of leads us right into the next boot on our list, which is the Total 90 Laser 3. The second variation was really similar to the first, and this third variation was a bit of a departure. Now, I did own this pair of football boots, and I enjoyed them a lot. Instead of one singular target on the midfoot, they went for multiple rectangular target areas, multiple pieces of plastic, kind of a target strip along the medial side of the boot. And, these were a great pair of football boots. They were pretty comfortable. I had a few issues with durability over the course of a season. I think they started to tear between the sole plate and the upper, but any player knows that's something where if you're wearing your boots enough over the course of the season, it's just inevitable. But I think it lacks kind of the same punch that the original design had. So for that reason, I think it's going to be a B tier, in my opinion. So we got our Total 90 series out of the way there. And next we have a really cool looking football boot. From an aesthetic perspective, probably the craziest one that's on this list. And this is the original Nike Mercurial. And this boot came out in 1998, so at this point over 25 years ago, which is crazy to think about. And you may have seen these boots on Ronaldo Nazario in the 98 World Cup. And it was a huge starting point for Nike. I mean, you could largely think of this as them kicking off the Mercurial series, which to date is probably the most popular football boot in the world. It is the most popular model in the world. So it's been an extremely, fruitful and productive past 25 years for Nike, and this is the boot that started all of that. I will say though, it's very different from the Mercurials that we see today. Not much of what you'll see in this boot you'll see carried on throughout the next 20 years. For example, the leather material, the bulkier construction, the crazier colorway, and the pretty basic sole plate. But even then, I think this is, it was such a landmark moment for Nike, and it's still a really solid football boot by today's standard. I would put it in the A tier. But next we have what was arguably an even bigger landmark moment for Nike, and that was the release in 2002 of the first Mercurial Vapor. So the Mercurial Vapor, that's the current line of Mercs that we see today. As of 2023, we're on the Mercurial Vapor 15. This is what started that line in 2002. And with the first Mercurial Vapor, you're actually starting to see where Nike ultimately progressed to with that Mercurial line. This is a great chrome colorway that they came out with initially. And it also had a much more aggressive sole plate than the initial Mercurial that came out a few years before. And it was considerably lighter. And I think that this is going to be ranked higher for me because I think it guided Nike more closely to what the Mercurial became today. And to me, when I think of a Mercurial, and especially when I think of the classic Mercurials, the original is one that, their original Mercurial Vapor is one that comes to mind. So for me, this is going to be another S tier boot, the original Mercurial Vapor. And to finish things off with the Mercurial series, I wanted to include another model here. This was the Vapor 4 that came out a few years later after the original Vapor. This was really popular, I believe, during the 2010 World Cup. Especially there was a gray and orange colorway that you saw almost every player wearing that had Nikes on. And I also own this pair of boots in a neon green colorway. And I thought they were a great pair of boots. They had a full lace cover, which some people either loved or hated. I thought it was a pretty cool addition to the design. It had a really aggressive sole plate, a really thin synthetic upper, and I thought it looked great. I think that lace cover contributes to the really sleek looking one-piece upper, and in my opinion, this would be another A tier Mercurial. All right, so now we've covered 3 great models from the Mercurial line. We're going to be moving on to some other classics from Nike, starting with the original Nike Tiempo. So this boot came out in 1994, which is almost 30 years ago at this point, which is absolutely crazy. And honestly, just looking at it, I mean, it looks like a current day Nike Premier 3. So it looks like a boot that you could get today. And I've never gotten the chance to try on the original Tiempo. I wonder if it's even still possible to get 30 years later. But I mean, what an amazing looking football boot. It's got a really basic sole plate. This looks like an SG variation. It looks like there's only a handful of sharp studs at the bottom. Full kangaroo leather upper, traditional lace cover. These boots, although I'm sure they're very comfortable, they're probably also a little bit on the heavier side as well. But these boots aesthetically, they just look so good. Originally, I was thinking of putting them at A tier, but I mean, for me, I think I have to go S tier for the original Tiempo. And the Tiempo has seen a lot of good models since then. Actually, the Tiempo Legend 9 that came out last year was, I think, one of the best Tiempos to date. But there's a reason that the Tiempo model has been so popular since its inception, and that's because the original model was just so good. And I mean, following it up with this boot, oh my god, this is the Tiempo Air Legend in white here. I had to include this boot on the list because this was actually the signature Tiempo of Ronaldinho. It's the only signature football boot that's on this list, so the only one that's dedicated to a specific player. And God, what an amazing looking football boot. It's a full white leather upper with gold embroidery and a gold Nike swoosh. It's going to be a little bit lighter than the original Tiempo that came a few years before that we just discussed. This is another pair of football boots that I would love to get my hands on. They look amazing, and I'm certain that they're extremely comfortable. And in my opinion, this has to be another S tier boot. I know the S tier is getting a little bit crowded, but I mean, there's a reason these are some of the best iconic boots of all time. So next up, we have a slate of some Adidas boots. In fact, we have a lot of Predators to get into, which are, obviously the Predator, if you were to choose one model line, it's probably been one of the most popular and culturally significant right next to the Mercurial. So we have several different Predators that we're going to be discussing here. Okay, and first up, we have the Adidas Predator Accelerator. Now, in my opinion here, this is not the best of the retro Predators. I just think that, when I think of the three stripes from Adidas, I think of a boot that, feels really strong, really serious. Look at the powerful three stripes going down the side of the Copa Mundial. But I just think that the wide kind of panning three stripes of the Predator Accelerator, it looks a little bit goofy to me, in my opinion. The design, I'm not a huge fan of the colorway. I think the stripes are a little bit too wide, and aesthetically, the boots look a little all over the place. I like the elasticated tongue that we see in other models as well, but for me, unfortunately, this boot is going to go C tier. Not because it's bad, but just because there's other Predator models that I think I like a little bit more. And that brings us to our next model here, which is the Predator Precision, which recently got a remake because it was so popular. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, this is a great boot. I think the design is a lot tighter than the Accelerator that we just looked at. There's rubber elements on the front of the boot to give you a little bit more traction with the ball. And you still have that traditional elasticated tongue at the top that's going to provide lace coverage as well. And I think that the three stripes were incorporated a lot cleaner here as well. For me, this is going to be a B tier. And I went back and forth between A and B on the Predator Precision here. And the only reason I gave it a B tier is because the next boot on our list is the Predator Mania, which is such a sleek looking football boot. I think the straight three stripes just give it a cleaner look than the Precision that we just looked at. So for me, the Predator Mania is going to be A tier. And you can kind of see a pattern here in the Predators getting better and better with each rating, because last up we have the Adidas Predator Absolute. famously worn by Zinedine Zidane and many other great players. I've got the gold colorway here. This is, in my opinion, aesthetically, it's tough looking at this whole list. This is one of my favorites, right up there with the Tiempo Legend Air. This is such an iconic looking football boot. The all gold colorway is amazing. I don't know if I've ever seen another football boot pull off a gold colorway quite like this Predator. It just looks so amazing. I love the slim 3 white stripes. I think it's really minimal. The texturing on the leather looks great. I mean, this reminds me, when Predators were full kangaroo leather. I partially wish Adidas would bring that back. We haven't seen a kangaroo leather Predator in several years now. But for me, the Predator Absolute, it has to be S tier. I mean, this boot, it just looks so sick. Then finally, we have 3 pretty iconic models to wrap things up. We got the Copa Mundial, another model from Adidas. I mean, to be honest, there's really only one boot on this list that is still for sale in its original design, and that's the Copa Mundial. So, I mean, for that alone, I think it has to be S tier, because that is, by definition, standing the test of time. It's still a great selling boot. It's still very comfortable. I own a pair of the Copa Mundials. It's got great build quality, one of the most durable pairs of boots I've ever owned. It, in my opinion, has to be S tier. And if you're a referee, it's pretty much the only option. And then finally, we have our last 2 boots. This is, if you don't recognize it, this is actually the oldest boot on this list, and this is the original Puma King from 1966. These boots were worn by Pele in his debut World Cup. I mean, these are boots that you're not going to be able to find on the market today, and they likely aren't going to be made with the same construction that you'd find in a current Puma King model. But I mean, they do the job. It looks like they're going to provide you traction with the field. They're probably pretty heavy. I'd probably bet that they are the heaviest boots on this list. But if they're good enough for Pele, they should be good enough for anyone. And aesthetically, they're great. I actually think some of the most recent Puma King line, Puma King football boots haven't been that great. I think they've been a little bit disappointing. They're actually running full synthetic Puma Kings now, so you can't even get one in leather anymore. But the Puma King, it used to be a really popular line. It was worn by Pele. I think it was worn by Maradona for a period of time as well. And in my opinion, that deserves some respect, so I'm going to put these in the A tier. And then last up, we've got another boot that you can still buy in a model that's very close to its original release, and that's the Mizuno Morelia. This boot has been around for 35 years approximately. They just celebrated their 35th anniversary. It's another amazing football boot. Mizuno makes some of the best leather football boots on the market. It's really high quality kangaroo leather. Their made in Japan boots are some of literally the most comfortable football boots you'll ever try on. And for that reason alone, I think I'm gonna have to put this in the S tier just because of the quality, the comfort, and the durability. And there you have it. So that pretty much wraps up our tier list for today. Let me know in the comments if there are any iconic football boots that I'm missing from my list and you think should be added. Additionally, just let me know which one of these football boots was your absolute favorite. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.